Hey there, and welcome into the RotoWire PGA Rundown Show. I am your host, Ryan Andrade. Join me, as always, is my fellow golf writer at RotoWire, Lynn Hochberg. We will be previewing all things fantasy golf for the Farmers Insurance Open this week. We'll touch on a little bit of DFS, some best bets, some one and done, and more. But first, Lynn, I just want to get your reaction to the tournament we saw last week, the American Express out in Palm Springs. Scottie Scheffler did it again. His 20th win on the PGA Tour, all of them coming since the start of 2022. What was your take on the week out at the Amex? And does this sort of change your thoughts on the year that you think Scottie Scheffler might have in 2026?
Yeah, well, it's great to be with you, Ryan. It was not a good sign for the other golfers. Scottie Scheffler had, of all the things that Scottie Scheffler does and has done, he had never won his first start of the year. So maybe a little bit of a slow starter usually, but I mean, last year he was coming back from injury, so we'll give him that. But yeah, it's an ominous sign for the other golfers. Scottie Scheffler looked great, although I will say that Jason Day, who finished runner-up, really could have won this tournament. He was fantastic on the stadium course. He beat Scottie Scheffler on the 2 rounds they played on the stadium course by 7 strokes. He just didn't get it done at the easier La Quinta and Nicklaus courses. And if he would have shot a 62 or 63, as a lot of guys were doing, he really could have won this tournament. So a good sign for Jason Day as well, but obviously a terrific sign for Scottie Scheffler.
Yeah, for sure. Scottie just, I looked like a fool last week. I said his top 8 streak was going to come to an end, and I guess he didn't like that. He just, the tournament was basically over midway through the back 9, and, he just put it in the water on 17 just for giggles, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you had Blades Brown, 18-year-old Blades Brown. That was a big story people were talking about. He was in the final group, nearly shot a 59 in the second round. Actually, parred the last 3 holes, or else it could have been a really low one. But he played 8 rounds in a row. He came from the Bahamas, which was a Wednesday finish on the Korn Ferry Tour, all the way out to Palm Springs. The next day, less than 24 hours, is teeing it up again in a PGA Tour event and doing great things. So going to be interesting to watch, his progression throughout the next couple of years. Siwoo Kim, he was the 54-hole leader. I think it was a very similar fashion to what we saw from Davis Riley, who was the 54-hole leader at the Sony Open. They both had just a really tough 4-hole stretch, like at the end of the front 9, and at that point, Scottie was making all kinds of birdies, and it was kind of over from there. But Siwoo Kim still playing some great golf. But yeah, let's get into this week. Farmers Insurance Open, obviously, biggest storyline is the return of Brooks Koepka. Everybody's talking about that. Even ESPN is big on that. They for the first time in 20 years, they will be providing coverage of a non-major championship. They're doing 3 hours coverage early before the Golf Channel coverage comes on Thursday and Friday. So Len, what are you expecting the first event back for Brooks Koepka?
Yeah, it's just going to be quite the spectacle. And I think it was really going to be quite the spectacle even before ESPN made their big announcement on Monday that they will be showing, early coverage on Thursday and Friday, and incredibly bumping Pat McAfee to ESPN2 those days. I mean, that's just remarkable. I mean, he's one of their obviously biggest stars. So this is incredible. And I think there was a lot of pressure on Brooks Koepka to perform. Everyone will be watching him. And this was even before this whole thing with ESPN, which ratchets everything up for me exponentially. So, I do think it will be, I think we should temper expectations on Brooks Koepka this first week back. I know just knowing who Brooks Koepka is, that he will not want to fall flat on his face. And I'm sure he's been preparing rigorously for this, but it's just an incredible amount of pressure. He hasn't even played this course much through the years, and he hasn't had much success. He played it 4 times. He only made 1 cut, so he wasn't great here. Putting everything else aside, this doesn't seem to be a course that he likes. So I am tempering expectations. I think we have to give him a few tournaments to get back. I mean, I guess he'll play Phoenix, and he's much more comfortable there. So, I think making the cut would be a big win for Brooks Koepka this week. But after that, not expecting very much.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Obviously he's a huge name, and I think it's good he's back. Obviously a 5-time major winner, so he brings a lot just with that title alone. But this is a guy that's he's kind of struggled in the majors recently, honestly, since he won that 2023 PGA at Oak Hill. Not in contention very much. So he's 162nd on Data Golf right now. Obviously, that might go up a little bit as, he plays in some stronger fields being on the PGA Tour. But, he's still definitely a little ways away from his best golf. So I agree. I think it's going to take a little while for him to sort of get in the rhythm of it. And, hopefully by, Augusta time, he's back up there, competing with, some of the best that the world has to offer. I think obviously Koepka's the huge storyline here. I think another guy that we should probably touch on is Xander Schauffele, right? This is his, this hometown tournament. He's coming off a really disappointing season, quite honestly, after that incredible 2024. You expecting anything, from Xander this week? And do you think he's sort of going to be able to try to get back to those 2024 vibes?
Well, I certainly expect him to have a better year than in 2025 than he did in 2025. He was injured, part of last year, and that really sunk his season. He's another guy. This has not been a great tournament for him. He's had some better results lately, but he had some really bad results earlier in his career. Interestingly, this is his season debut. I think the guys who've been playing have a little bit of an advantage. Certainly, if you've played 1 tournament, and then there are guys who've played 2 tournaments who are playing this week, I think they will have an edge over Xander Schauffele. I do think, I agree with you, he will have a better year in 2026 than 2025. But I also am not big on Xander this week as well. I'm going to wait and see what happens. I don't think this is a great place for him to start, but he chose his schedule for whatever reason. But I'm gonna keep him on my sideline as well this week.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting week, right? Because last week was pretty much the ultimate birdie fest. All those courses are, there's very little penalty for hitting in the rough. You can kind of spray the ball around and still score. The green complexes are very easy. We come to this week, particularly the South course is an absolute brute. It's really like the longest course on the PGA Tour, and it's going to play even longer since it's right next to the water. You got the air's a little bit heavier. The rough is 4 inches of just nasty roughs. There's some rough around the green that's really not fun to get into. So, I think we can kind of, transition into our DFS tiers here. And Len, it's totally different look this week, right? There's no Scotty. There's no target way out in front of everybody else. It's everybody's kind of a little bit more bunched up in the 9 and 10K range. So, what kind of stands out to you at the top of the board here?
Well, 2 names we haven't mentioned yet. Ludwig Oberg and Patrick Cantlay are my favorite plays in the 10,000 and up on DraftKings. Oberg, again, another guy who did not have a great season last year. His one highlight, however, was winning the Genesis Invitational, which was relocated to here, Torrey Pines South, because of the devastating fires in the Los Angeles area. And, this is a great fit for him. He's just a tremendous driver of the golf ball. If you hit it long and you can hit it straight, you will have, severe advantages this week. And when he is on his game, he can do just that. And he did that back last February or March or whatever it was, February, I guess. So I do look for him to play well this week. He is coming off a withdrawal at the Amex. He was ill, and presumably that was just a temporary thing, or he would not be in the field this week. So I do like him. And Patrick Cantlay going on 4 years, close to 4 years without a win since the fall of February of 2022. He's fallen outside the top 25 in the world. But if you look at him statistically, and as I did from last year, his numbers across all the strokes gained metrics were not bad. They were pretty good. He didn't have a real weakness in any area. He just had trouble putting it all together in one tournament. He was fifth in this tournament last year, the Genesis that Hochberg won. So he clearly can play this course. I think he also is a good fit, can hit the ball fairly long and very straight, and he does everything pretty well. He's got to win at some point, right? So I do think whether he wins this week or not, I do expect good things from Patrick Cantlay as well.
Yeah, that's a good point about, hitting it long and straight here. I think this is about as important a week for that as it gets. I was kind of shocked to realize that these are the fourth most narrow fairways on the PGA Tour. I was shocked by that, considering, how long the course is, how penal the rough is. So for me, I feel like whenever we come to Torrey Pines, that's like the biggest thing I'm looking for is guys that are really high in total driving, can hit it a long ways, have really high club head speed. So I'll sort of transition over to the 7K range here. 8K range, honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of. That is where we find Brooks Koepka this week. He is at a flat 8,000. I think there's a lot of questions about, where he might show up. But on down a little bit further, Michael Thorbjornsen is the guy who I think is perfect for this test. Led the PGA Tour last season in total driving, first in greens and regulation percentage on the PGA Tour. I think this is just a perfect place for him. I think this is about the lowest we will see him in a non-signature event for a while. I kind of mentioned him last week. I'm really, really high on his upside, high on his potential for 2026. I think he's going to do really well this week. Coming off a missed cut last week, but this is just, a completely different test here at Torrey Pines South. And then another guy that's kind of right next to him is Nikolai Højgaard, 7,500. He's making the trek from Dubai, finished T4 over in Dubai. Course that actually played, pretty tough this past week. He's another guy that just hits it a mile, really, really good iron player. And another little stat that I think was kind of interesting is, he's been kind of up and down with the putter, but last season he was 8th in putting from 4 to 8 feet, which I think is going to be really important this week. I don't necessarily think you have to make a ton of long ones, but it's really the short ones that you have to stay steady on, especially on these bumpy Poana greens. There's going to be a lot of, putts that wiggle off the line, especially in the afternoons. I think that's something to keep an eye on here. Len, what about some value we can find, maybe the lower 7K, even on in the 6K range?
Yeah, one guy, I was surprised to see Justin Rose so low. The guy's number 10 in the world on whether you want official world golf ranking or data golf. He's pretty darn high on the food chain right there. And so he's way down at 7,500, and he has won at this course before. He's a pretty good driver of the golf ball. And so that just seems like just incredible value screaming out, even if you don't think he can win. He's $7,500. And just below him at 7,300, Christian Bezuidenhout. I don't think he can win the tournament, but he's got, some skills that could translate well this week. He's not a long hitter, but he does some other things well. He's one of the straightest hitters. And I think if you are going to hit, if you're going to pick somebody who hits it very far or very straight, I think ultimately you want to go with someone who's going to hit it straight. I think you can survive if you get the ball in the fairway. And if you're not, if you're in that Kikuyu rough that you were talking about, I think it twists the club. It just makes things very hard. So he will get the ball in the fairway, and he will be from farther back, and he may not get it on the green. Well, he was also terrific around the green. He was one of the few players, maybe the only player on tour last year, top 20 in both strokes gained around the green and strokes gained putting. And that will cover up for a lot of mistakes if you, because greens will be missed this week. One thing we didn't mention, for all the length at this course, the greens are very small, only average 5,000 square feet at Torrey. There's only 2 courses on the PGA Tour, at least 7,500 yards with small greens, 5,000 or less, and that's Torrey Pines South and Muirfield Village for the Memorial. So with long approach shots, greens will be missed. And Christian Bezuidenhout is very good around the green, and he's very good on the green. So I do like him, maybe to finish in the top 20 or something. I don't think he can get to a victory there. But those 2 guys in the low 7,000s really stood out for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, this course, when you just sort of look through some of the winners, it's kind of a lot of, your big hitters, and then also a lot of, guys that hit it pretty short but are great scramblers, great putters. It's kind of an interesting mix that you get here every year, it seems like. I think one other guy that I think was a little bit further down that I was kind of looking at was Gary Woodland. He was at 6,800. He's still one of the longest players at age 41. And he's got a ton of experience at this event. He's played it 15 times before. He's gained off the tee in 13 of them. He's gained on approach in 14 of them. This is Gary Woodland's type of playground, I believe. Okay, so we've gone through all the DFS tiers here. We could go over to the betting board here, and I will pull up DraftKings, and we don't have anybody plus 300 this week, that's for sure, with no Scotty Scheffler in the field. But Xander Schauffele checks in at plus 1,500 here. Ludwig Oberg is just a little bit below that. What kind of guys towards the top do you sort of like the value for on the betting board?
Yeah, and you're right. There's no Scotty Scheffler. I think you can play anyone that you think is going to win and get a decent return. I do think that we should not, if playing the outright market, I will not look too far down the board. There are a lot of top guys in this. There are 27 of the top 50. Some pretty big names here. And on the tougher courses, I just think that most of the time, the better golfers have a better chance to win. I mean, that may sound obvious, but I think when, we talked about it last week, when you get to a birdie fest like at the Amex, anybody can get hot with the putter. I think skill really will rise here this week. So, I do an article. I contribute to an article on bookies.com every week, and they ask me for a winner, and I just submitted that. And I submitted Patrick Cantlay. He's plus 2350. Last time I checked, there's some odd numbers on DraftKings.
I did notice that. Yeah, I don't know why.
But weird things, 184 and 9250, and yeah. So I was wondering if I kept staring at it. Do I need glasses? But he's plus 2350, and yeah, like I said, he hasn't won in forever, but he's sort of come close, and he's not playing as badly as we might think. Yeah, he doesn't do it in the majors, but this isn't a major. But again, he was 5th at the Genesis last year at this course, and that was in a tougher field than this one. That was a signature event, so it will be a little bit easier sledding for Patrick Cantlay. He would be my favorite play to pick an outright.
Yeah, Cantlay I think is a good call. He's so funny because, last year it just feels like a lot of people are like, oh, he had a terrible year or whatever. And I kind of looked through a lot of the stats, and I'm like, there's a lot of like really good stuff here. He just it just seemed like he was never in contention apart from, the Tour Championship the last week of the season. So, I expect him to win at some point this year. You're right. It's got to happen. It's been long enough. He's been close enough. I think I'm actually going to go back to the Chris Gotterup will plus 2,600. I think this is another great venue for him. Last season he was top 10 in strokes gained off the tee, driving distance, and clubhead speed. This is a guy that even if he's driving it wildly, he's going to be close enough where he can gouge it out. Last season he ranked 11th in proximity out of the rough. So those big muscles are certainly doing their job out there. And I think the other thing that doesn't get talked enough with Goddard is just how much touch he has around the green. I feel like it really sort of came to the forefront last season at the Scottish Open, the Open Championship. You get a lot of really tight lies and that sort of thing out there. And he was great. Last season he was 19th in scrambling. He putted great at the Sony Open when he won. So, he didn't play last week, obviously, but I think if there was ever going to be a course where he could go back to back, I think this might be the one. So, I think I'll go with Goddard up there. Any sort of placement bets that you like, whether top 5, top 10, top 20?
Yeah, one of the other things I do for bookies.com, in that same article, a bunch of us from different platforms contribute to that article. It's live every week. It'll be live later today. They do ask me for a top 20, and my pick was Will Zalatoris at the crazy price of plus 184, but whatever, 184. And this is a course like, I think Zalatoris is a guy like an Hochberg where, can hit, just terrific off the tee. And he actually has had some great success at Torrey Pines pre-back surgeries, unfortunately, but he was runner-up here in 2022 and 7th in 2021. And, he's only played 2 times since he shut it down last year after the PGA Championship and had another back surgery. Well, he came back in late in the year. He played 1 tournament in South Africa and finished 15th. That was a top 20. And then he played last week at the Amex, which would not be, in my mind, a very good fit for a Will Zalatoris, and he tied for 18th. So we never know how long his back is going to hold up. Anyone with a back injury, Tiger Woods, Will Zalatoris, you just never know when it will flare again. And unfortunately for Will Zalatoris, it did flare again, more than flare. He needed another surgery, but he's played 2 starts since he came back. He's had top 20s both times. I think this course is a better fit for him. So I do like him as a placement for a top 20.
Yeah, I like that. Zalatoris, I feel like it's such a shame that he had to go through all that. He had one of the best starts to a career as far as, going through the major championships, some of the toughest courses. So I do like that pick. I had a couple placements written down. I'll just touch on some of the players we haven't talked about yet. Haotong Li was plus 670 for a top 10 finish. He's a great ball striker. He was 18th in strokes gained off the tee, 4th in strokes gained approach last season on the DP World Tour. And he's finished top 10 in 3 of his last 4 starts worldwide. So, he was up there a little bit last week at the Amex. Another guy I thought it deserved a shout was Lee Hodges, plus 880 for a top 10. He finished top 10 at Torrey Pines last year. He was T6 back at the Sony Open. It's another, great iron player, but also I think he has a pretty underrated short game. So those would be 2 guys a little further down that I think could score a top 10. Let's sort of transition over into the one and done, everybody's favorite section. Last week, I thought Harry Hall was going to miss the cut. That was my pick. He salvaged his top 25 somehow, but obviously that doesn't really mean a whole lot in these games. Who did you have again last week, Len?
I had Sam Burns.
Burns. Okay.
He was sort of in the neighborhood, but didn't have a good finish on Sunday. But he was hovering around top 10. But really, even a top 10 in these one and dones, they don't do it. I mean, you just got to get a few wins. I mean, there's just such a disparity in money. If you win, we talked about it last week. If you win a number of tournaments, 3 tournaments the whole season, you're going to be somewhere in the mix, depending on how many people are in your pool and of course, other variables. But, there's really no consolation prize in one and done. It is so, obviously money centric and heavy centric on winning. So top 20 there's no joy or satisfaction in that.
Oh, I mean, even if you use, Scotty last week, yeah, you're probably first in your pool, but like, he's going to win another event. He's going to win one that has a lot more money. So I don't know. One and done it's always a tough call every week, but yeah, you're right. You need those high finishes for sure. We kind of talked about this a little earlier, but just from a strategy perspective here, this is Torrey Pine South is, one of the hardest courses on the PGA Tour. Do you think, we sort of have to lean towards taking, one of the higher ranked players in the field because of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to lean toward the higher ranked players in just about any field. If they, even a birdie fest like the Amex, where I think the potential winner comes from a larger pool, I'm still going to go with a top guy, because to try to identify, to dart throw the long shot who is going to win the tournament is really challenging. But especially at a difficult course, I think, even more so, I will concentrate on the higher ranked players. And I would say like a top 10 or a top 15 player, but Patrick Cantlay isn't a top 10 or 15 player right now, or even a top 25. But we talked about him a lot already, but he's going to be my one and done pick. I'm not looking for too much flash. I'm not looking for any Cowboys this week. I'm looking for bogey avoidance as opposed to, birdie average. Last year the winning score was 8 under. Yes, there was some very heavy wins, but usually it's in the 13 under range, 14, 12, somewhere around there, where you just got to be really cautious and just take your spots when you can, take your chances when you can. And there aren't too many of those. And very few players have a lower pulse than the excitable Patrick Cantlay. So I think he's got a good temperament for this course, and a pretty good golf game as well. We don't see too many highs and lows from him, and I think that's a sound strategy this week. You just have to be very, very patient at this course.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Chris Gotterup. Mentioned him a little bit earlier, but I think I just don't see him being that popular this week at all, especially coming off a win. I feel like a lot of people think, that's his ceiling. He's already got his win. He's not going to get the win again. I'm gonna go right back to him just because what I said earlier. I think he's a great fit here. And there's been a lot of big, strong players like him that have had success at this course over the years. So we're gonna go with Chris Goddard up here. Try to get a high finish, move up the standings. In our RotoWire pool, I don't think really anybody's had any super high picks. A lot of people were on Siwoo Kim last week. I think around the one and done world, he was pretty much the highest guy everywhere. Looked like he was going to get that for a while, but faded down to a T6, which as we kind of mentioned, even a T6 is nice, but it's not really going to move the needle. So
right.
Score predictions. You mentioned it a little bit. We've seen all types of scores here really over the years. Last year was 8 under. We've seen some as low as 5 or 6 under. The weather is always a big talking point at this course. I looked at the weather. It looks like it's going to be fantastic. It doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of wind at all. It doesn't look like it's going to be super cold. Average winning score over the last 5 years is 12.6 under par. I think I'm going to go with a little bit higher just because of the good weather. I'm going to go around 16 under par. What do you think?
Yeah, golfodds.com, Jeff Sherman over at Golf Odds. He set it at 13.5 under. And you're right, I did check. The winds are really, really light all week, no rain. The one thing, it's not going to get super warm. It's going to be, I know half the country's like under two
Be
feet.
careful, then. Be
I know
careful.
they're 2 feet of snow, but it's going to be about 70 or so. And I'm nearby. I'm in Los Angeles, and there are some chilly mornings. And these guys will be getting out pretty early. So that, that won't be really matter too much on the weekend, but the first couple of rounds, that's the one thing about the weather. But I do think that all indications weather-wise would indicate a score lower, higher than 13.5 under. So I would say about 15 or so. I think you'll go over. I don't know if it's over or under. I always get flummoxed about that, but I think it'll be more than 13.5, 14 or 15 or something, in that range.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't really be the Farmers Insurance Open if we didn't have, one day get delayed 2 hours for fog. So,
That's right. It's possible.
You got to imagine we're going to get that at some point just because it happens every year. So, but yeah, no, I think that's about all I got. We did some bold predictions last week, or I did, but they completely fell flat on their face. So I think I'm going to take a week off from that. But anything else, Lynn, you want to get off your chest about this week?
Yeah, it's just all about Brooks Koepka to me. I mean, I don't think he's going to be there on Sunday, but this is just such a huge, huge moment in golf that he is coming back. I mean, no one has ever come back before because there's never been a live golf to come back from before. And then just that ESPN announcement to cut into the Pat McAfee show to show this golf tournament because of Brooks Koepka is just incredible. I mean, it's just incredible for the PGA Tour, for Brian Rolap, that this is just a nice feather in his cap that he, saw. I don't know if he saw all of this, but he did figure out a way to bring Brooks Koepka back and not have a 1-year layoff, as a lot of people wanted, a 1-year penalty, a suspension. That was never going to happen. So I just think it's just really exciting to see. And I think people are just going to tune in to watch Brooks Koepka. I think that's incredibly hard on Brooks Koepka, almost more pressure than like in a major Sunday at Augusta. I think he's going to be really nervous. He hasn't played well for a while. We're going to find out if he's 35 years old. We're going to find out if he didn't play well because he was just in live and it zapped the competitiveness, at least from him. It doesn't do that for everybody, but I think that's a thing for some. Or if he's just sort of on coming down the hill on the other side of his career. But I don't think we can make any assumptions or come up with any conclusions this week. But I'm just really fascinated to see it. It's just a great moment for the PGA Tour, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. This is a guy that we've always thought was unflappable and just rises to the biggest moments when the stakes are the highest. That's when he always played the best. But I do think you're right. I think standing on that first tee box Thursday morning, I think, Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, they haven't quite released the tee times yet, but I think he'll be more nervous for that first tee shot than he has in any major that he's played. So, he's getting all the attention this week, all the attention. He's said publicly, I've got a lot of people to apologize to and talk with one-on-one. So I think, as we sort of said at the beginning, it's going to take a while for him to kind of, get everything together. So.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this. I mean, as I wrote in my article, my DraftKings preview article, it's live on RotoWire. He has 5 career majors. I mean, if he gets 1 or 2 more, I mean, you're talking about some really, really lofty status in the history of the game of golf. If he gets 1 more, you're tying Mickelson and Trevino and Faldo. And if you can get 2 more, we're talking Arnold Palmer and Sam Snead, and that moves. You get 2 more, you get to 7. You move into the top 10 all time. So, in some ways, it's kind of a shame. I'm wondering if he's kicking himself. I mean, he got so much money to go to live, but he sort of lost the last 2.5 years. He has not had a top 10 in a major since he won that 2023 PGA. These things are hard to win, and and maybe he gave up some of the best remaining years, the best chances of his career to get those, because if you get to 7, my goodness. I mean, 5 is pretty substantial, but 6 and 7, we're talking, really rarefied air on the PGA Tour.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it'll be great to watch. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people tuning in. I think there'll be a lot of, just casual golf fans that maybe just, tune into the majors that, know Brooks Koepka because he was always in contention for so long there that might tune in. And, I think that's absolutely great for the PGA Tour, as we've said. So yeah, I mean, that'll do it for the Farmers Insurance preview here. We will be back next Tuesday. We'll look ahead to WN Phoenix Open. It's an absolutely stacked field. Brooks Koepka will be there. Scotty will be back, looking to go 2 in a row. So that'll be a lot of fun. Follow us. You can get me at @roto_Ryan and then @Len Hochberg on X. We will see you next week.